So we cannot have a limited supply. That is also not reasonable. So we need a fiscal system that is actually adapting, because in the end, the fiscal system is just there to enable trade. And it should be enough money so everybody can trade without a limitation. So nobody has to say like, actually, the value is $20, but I just have $10. So I cannot trade because there is not even so much money in the system that I can trade, right? So I cannot even create more value.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Assalamu alaikum to another episode of Tekka Talks. Today we have with us a very special guest. His name is Benjamin Talin. Am I saying your name right? I'm very finicky about names. Okay. We have with us a very special guest, Benjamin Talin, who is a distinguished government and economic policy advisor, renowned for his strategic insights and expertise in shaping economic development initiatives globally. So that is a big role. With a background as CEO at More Than Digital and as a keynote speaker, Benjamin leverages his extensive experience to advise governments, organizations, and nonprofits on navigating the complexities of digital transformation and economic policy. Amazing. Additionally, he has also been in a panel with Vitalik Buterin and advised EU commissions and ministries on Web3, which is our sweet spot. Lastly, as a prominent figure in the field, he plays a pivotal role in driving forward-thinking strategies that foster innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainable economic growth. So, Benjamin, that is the official biography. Tell us the unofficial story.
It's hard to actually put me into words. And when I hear about myself, I always think like, oh my God, this is a long list. But yeah, unfortunately, I got a lot of different hats on during my time. So, I mean, in the end, I'm just a rebel. I just tried to actually rethink the basic things, and I did that since I was very young. So I started my career actually with 13 with my first company there. So that was pretty much me, just thinking like, it can be done better, and oh, there is something like technology, so can we change something with this technology? And yeah, and long story short, I was publishing a lot on digital transformation, change management. I was also going into different fields, and suddenly I found myself actually advising governments on economic policies, on especially also policies to help SMEs. You know, that's one of the biggest problems, how to help small and medium-sized businesses to deal with digital transformation or all this new technology and innovation fuss. And and it grew with time. And honestly, I don't even know how I came to all these different positions and hats. I mean, now I advised 16 different governments worldwide and ministries. I'm sitting in 3 different EU commissions. I founded over a dozen companies on my own. I published around 450 different publications. So yeah, for me, I just do things. That's why I say I'm just a rebel at heart. I just want to change whatever is there and use technology for better, because for me, it's always, if somebody tells me, nah, it cannot be done, for me, it's usually, I gotta prove you wrong.
Oh, that is amazing. Can you just give us a little bit of context? So where are you from originally, and which governments, if you don't mind telling us, do you actually advise?
Sure, the official list I can share. So where I'm originally from is actually from Austria. Was done traveling and lived, I think, in over 10 or 12 different countries. So if living is more than 6 months. So I was around a lot, it seems. But also in Switzerland for 11 years then in total. So that was pretty much, or is still, my home base, even despite traveling most of the time now. And which government I advised is actually from Peru to a lot of Central European governments, from Switzerland, Austria, of course. I was involved also with the Spanish one, but also, for example, a little further east when it comes to India, and as we are speaking here also, UAE and Saudi Arabia. That's were also two of them.
So that's
the official list I can share.
So it's quite a diverse group of countries. So we have very developed countries, we have developing countries, we have economic systems that go a certain way, and then political systems that go another way. Do you see this as, are they all the same ultimately when you advise them? Does that come into play? Or when you give economic advice, it's kind of the same thing everywhere?
We'll be right back after the break.
I believe that the financial system is broken. and that our banks and insurance companies do not have our best interests at heart. We've built Techaton to help us get together as a community to save, earn, and access credit. Join us today and discover how you can grow your savings while helping others.
Yes and no. It is the same thing because for me, logic always wins. So for me, that's actually why people seem to love me. I'm a brutal realist. Sometimes they don't want to hear the realistic stuff. So that is what I figured out what a lot of EU commissions don't like about me when it comes to being too brutally honest. But in the end, for me, it really doesn't change much. One of the things that is changing a lot is actually the infrastructure, which is already in place. Of course, for example, Switzerland has very, very different economic development measures and already organizations, etc., on board when you compare it with a country like Peru, for example, or also when you have new emerging countries. I mean, for example, Saudi Arabia is building at the moment a lot of this support, but it's still kind of like in a very early stage because it was not like in Switzerland for the last 50 years that they actually grew a system, and the tiny little Switzerland is spending billions on doing that. Of course, for example, if I just take the Saudi Arabia example, there is a huge influx now. So you also see the different drivers and demands. So while Germany, Switzerland, Austria is pretty much a stable investment or a stable, it's almost like operational costs. It's not an investment anymore. You see it in emerging countries as like, hey, we need to leapfrog. So the strategy behind it is different. The financing behind it is different, and the implications, of course, is different. And what makes it different is, of course, the supporting ecosystem. Because it's easier to think about local development, so how to actually help cities and regions, if there is something in place already, than if you need to think about to first, hey, how can we actually get there? So that's a very different thing. But in the end, if we take the bigger picture, that's always the same. Because the bigger picture of where countries need to work to and actually what the future brings, I mean, that's also part of my doing. I do a lot of future advisory and futurist. But for me, it's also how can we prepare, for example, the industries or also the economy or the society for a future that is digital. And I mean, we are in a future already of the past 20 years. Nobody ever believed that we spend 3.5 to 4 hours of our day on a freaking small device that is actually super unuser friendly, and you're just tapping on a flat screen. I mean, just imagine telling that somebody 20 years ago that you spend 4 hours a day on a flat small screen staring at it and liking cat pictures. Everybody would have said you're totally crazy. But that's the reality what we have, and that's also where we need to prepare ourselves for, because that has a lot of implications. I mean, just look at the implications it already has on personal relationships, on birth rates, etc. So we can't even trace it till now. It's just 20, it's not even 20 years of iPhone moment, but we have now already a very big implication when it comes to economy, society, and also our personal lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna, kind of zero in on what we want to understand from your perspective today, which is really about financial and economic trends, right, and global trends. And a couple of things in my own personal history always jump out to me when people talk about financial, economies and macro financial movements. So number one would be the 2008 financial crisis and the failure sort of regulations at that point in time to actually account for how much people can innovate in financial services in a dangerous way. With all the instruments that the bankers at the time had come up with that got so crazy, and there were like what was this subprime loans, and then the betting on the subprime loans, and then the derivative markets on the subprime loans. And so that was something that I'm always thinking, really, are governments up for the job of regulating digital innovation, especially financial, number one? And of course, the other thing that weighs on my mind is what is happening today. In the very present, we're dealing with high interest rates, which for us as Muslims, we try not to deal with interest, so it doesn't really impact us directly, but obviously from a macroeconomic standpoint, it does impact us. But high interest rates, which are causing bank failures and a lot of instability, and of course, inflation. Now, how do we figure those in, and what do you say to? So imagine those are the most important things in a regular person's mind, like me, today. What is the government's priority there? What do they need to do to at least bring sort of comfort to the general population?
I guess that's one of the biggest challenges, actually, because when we look at what is a government's job, so we tend to see always, I mean, there is like from different perspectives. In the USA, for example, the government is the enemy. So it's everything I do is good, and the government is actually doing the enemy side. In Europe, it's more kind of like it's this nurturing family. So government takes care of me if I'm in need, etc. So it's depending on legislation where you see it and how you see it, because it's a very fascinating dynamic. Because if we go in, and that was one of the publications I did, so what are the roles of governments? Because it was actually very funny that most people always discuss about the roles of the government. And I was like, what is the real role of a government? It's actually to avoid negative externalities and to improve the market participation, because we as people form the government, right? So we as people are somehow in this government or whatever, or in this construct of a country. So we want that actually everybody is fairly treated, that we are fairly treated, and we see that people are willing to give up their freedom in order to have a downside protection. So that is what we want from a government. We want a downside protection. So we don't want to completely lose our lives. We don't want to completely lose our finances, etc. So we are good to actually limit the upsides in a way, but the downside protection is the most important thing. And that is actually where it comes to play. And that is the problem when we speak about technology, because technology is always the fastest, right? So the technology comes. After the technology is the first users. So the private person comes after the technology. Somebody is adapting to a new technology. Until businesses catch up, it needs to have these persons in place. So it's technology, private persons, and businesses. When businesses start to actually leverage the technology, there is always, I mean, this is a human thing that we look for the loophole and that we try to actually try to grab this loophole and actually gain monetary or political or power or from whatever from this loophole. So we are not driven by the optimal solution. We are driven by the optimal solution for us. So that is why actually all the subprime crisis actually happened. I mean, you can literally trace it back to every financial scandal. It's about there is a loophole. Somebody tried to actually exploit the loophole. He got successful. He got greedy. The loophole opened wide. And in the end, it's a lot of people who are trying to fit into the loophole. And then the government needs to actually act, because one of the basic roles of a government is this avoiding negative externalities for people. So this loophole creates a negative externality because, for example, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was using a loophole which was undiscovered. So he was just actually taking all this money out because it's possible. He just called it stacking. In every financial other market, this wouldn't have been possible because there were already things in place to close these loopholes. And that's the same with the subprime crisis. Nobody knew it until it was actually too late. And that is the problem, that the government can also only act in a way after something happened, because you never know what is happening. And that is also the problem, because sometimes you need to strike the balance between, I need to foresee what is coming, that somebody can actually exploit the system, but maybe you're just seeing the wrong thing, right? So that is also possible. Nobody can predict how people get creative in actually creating a loophole or exploiting a loophole. And that is one of the trickiest challenges when it comes to governments, that you never know what is somebody doing, what will somebody do, or how this will evolve. And then you need to close a hole. And the problem in this is the hole is already there. It's already ripped open. It already created some backlashes. And most of the time they are good at closing it, because, yeah, it becomes maybe a multi-billion problem, but compared to the whole economy, it's still manageable, right? But the subprime crisis was literally a combination of so many levels of loopholes being close together and just having such a big impact because, of course, I mean, it's it's so many things involved from valuations up until the financial levers, etc. So you literally created on several levels a behemoth in a loophole, and that was hard to manage.
That's really interesting. So I guess today we have a problem. So we talked about, you know, human or private individuals, problems created by private individuals and trying to be greedy and looking at the loopholes. Now let's turn a little bit and say there are problems that are created by governments and central banks through maybe the way that the regulations are structured that have now an impact on the world today. So the key issue that we have on the world today is inflation. And, you know, you have so many examples of this. You have Egypt, which has just devalued their currency after announcing 42% inflation. You have, you know, Turkey, where the taxi drivers will not, you know, close out their day without first switching their lira into dollars every night, because if they don't, their earnings will be worth nothing tomorrow. You have Argentina, which is closely getting to the state of Venezuela, where the money is going to be used to, I don't know, make fireplaces. Nigeria, which is another situation where, you know, we have Nigerian people on our team that are from Nigeria, and they tell us every day we're just tracking how much the naira has fallen. And all of these you can more or less say are attributed to some very poor fiscal policies on the side of various governments, whether it's about debt, whether it's about overprinting, and also this external fiscal policies from countries like the United States, where their overprinting of dollars, and particularly during COVID, has maybe caused, you know, this, or more or less, not maybe not caused, but has accelerated the situation. So in this particular case, what are your thoughts? Like, this has now prompted people to look for alternatives. And as a government, you know, they are obviously saying, well, no, we still want control over the money. But like, how can you stop people from looking for alternatives, especially digital alternatives like crypto?
Actually, you can never stop people doing that. And I guess the problems most countries right now have is a multitude of problems enforcing each other. And that is the big problem. So yes, every fiscal policy will always be rigged, as the same as every other form of money will always be rigged. For example, everybody is always saying decentralized money is the future. Is it decentralized? If we look, for example, at the distribution in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's actually less distributed than any other fiscal system in the world. So sometimes you have these crypto whales actually owning 50% of these currencies. So that is also in itself, it's by design a flaw. For example, most cryptocurrencies that are being launched is also the founders, a team of 4, 5, 6 people get like 50, 60, 70% of the cryptos. And that is designed by a flaw. That is just a flawed design, right? And the same is also, I mean, for fiscal policies, you can also say it is driven by the US. Of course, they have the biggest leverage on what is going on. And also you see it with countries who have heavy exports, that they're actually relying on that, and that is creating a lot of different problems. That's why, for example, the petrodollar system is just one of the classical things, and why everybody is always doing that. That's why Ethiopia, for example, just said, like, we don't allow any new combustion engine cars to be imported, because we don't want that most of our money is literally flowing out of the country to just buy oil. So this is a heavy impact on that, because if you don't have a strong economy and suddenly an external fiscal decision has a big impact on your economy, because, for example, Ethiopia, it's more than 50% is actually flowing out just because of gasoline. 50% of their fiscal money value is flowing out of that. And I understand the country that they say, hey, we have a problem with that. It's actually not by design a flaw. That's pretty much like you have a design and you cannot have a better design. So it is a design flaw in itself, but they cannot escape it because there is no other measure. But if you have, for example, it's also fiscal policy is a very, very, very difficult thing because you have so many things influencing actually the currency. And normally, let's assume in a healthy market, when everybody has pretty much a healthy system in place, it would self-regulate, right? A country gets stronger, the industry gets stronger, so actually the currency gets stronger. This would be actually a normal thing. So it actually equalizes with the currency that actually everybody participates on the same. So that would be natural role of currency and fiscal policy to actually have this leveling. That's why, for example, one of the biggest challenges also for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is it's not reflecting the current economic situation of a country. So if you have, for example, the same currency for Venezuela, for USA, and for China, you're going to have devastating effects for two of these three players. And that is actually the problem what we also see with the central banks, because one of these players is the US in this case. So the US is also kind of like having this virtual global currency, which is impacting others. And we see, as you rightly mentioned, we see that when US prints money and everybody can print money, and also there is a big myth around it, a limited supply of money is not working out of a simple reason. Because let's assume it's just us three here and everybody owns 10 US dollars. So we trade goods worth 10 US dollars. So I give you something that is worth 10 US dollars. You give me the 10 US dollars from you. I give you something worth of that and you give it to Murat. And so we just trade. That would work, right? But we can never actually offer more than we already have. So if the economy is growing and if there are more participants in the market, we need more money. Otherwise, everybody has less money.
We'll be right back after the break.
Introducing TechAssure, the life insurance fund that is owned by the very people it insures. You share in the profits from insurance operations and take care of your family even after you're gone.
So we cannot have a limited supply. That is also not reasonable. So we need a fiscal system that is actually adapting, because in the end, the fiscal system is just there to enable trade. And it should be enough money so everybody can trade without a limitation. So nobody has to say like, actually, the value is $20, but I just have $10. So I cannot trade because there is not even so much money in the system that I can trade, right? So I cannot even create more value. And that is the thing with fiscal systems.
In that situation, doesn't the money just get more valuable? So your $10 will buy you more just because there's less to go around. You just divide that into, it becomes more divisible.
Yeah, but that devaluates the others. So we have inflation. So that is the thing. So suddenly, when I offer you something worth $20, but there's just $10 in the system, all the other services what you two have would suddenly need to deflate. So that would actually create inflation, right? Because the price for your thing is actually lower, so you need more money to buy exactly the same. So you get in the end less. So in being able to actually trade efficiently, you need enough money to actually cover the value. So when we introduce new technologies to the market, when we introduce new efficiencies in the market, or we create new industries or whatever, we need enough money to actually trade this value in a certain amount. Otherwise, that's what is happening. We have either a surplus, that is also bad, and we have not enough money. So we have actually a fiscal policy system that doesn't allow for trade. So either there is way too much trade because people have way too much money. That was the Corona example you gave. So we have way too much money in the system, and suddenly this starts overflowing because people make stupid decisions because they think like, money is for free. Or you have the other problem when suddenly the money is so tight that just the prices are deteriorating. And you don't want any of those to happen. And that's the problem with a super complex system like the fiscal system, because every government plays a role there. So we have suddenly 190 players on the field, and some of the players are super powerful. For example, China, European Union, or the European Central Bank, and of course the US. And they dictate the other players what to do. And they can actually, and that is the problem when we have such a very big, disconcerting power move between different countries, that they can actually control the flow of goods and money. Because, for example, the US is doing it always very well with the trade sanctions. So they can literally control how much dollars are flowing out and in. So for them, it's easier to do something because they are one of the biggest demand producers and one of the biggest exporters, and they have the money to actually trade all these two things, right? That is something, for example, Venezuela doesn't have. That's one of the problems Venezuela has, because they are not participating in a fair market. So in order to actually finance the export of oil, they need to print money, because otherwise they cannot buy back their own currency, right? So in order to actually export something, they need to cripple themselves. And that is happening with a lot of different countries.
So I hear what you're saying, and it sounds to me like you're saying, well, we do still need to have these fiscal policy tools. But there are some people who would argue that, a golden age of the economy was when we still had the gold standard, and when there was some kind of external, I want to say money or currency that everybody could, I guess, benchmark themselves against. And that made trade actually easy, because then you have this kind of very stable value. It doesn't matter how much you inflate your currency, as long as it's still pegged somehow to or not pegged, but rather it's still benchmarked against the gold standard. Therefore, then people actually know how much something is worth. So is that not a good system?
Well, as I said, if everybody has the same system, no country could actually do fiscal policy and no fiscal stimulation of the economy. That is the big thing. So it could work in a way, yes, but it wouldn't be beneficial for all. And that is what we try to forget in a simplified system. Because if we have a gold standard in the current times, with so much globalization, with so much international goods flows, and so much international trade that is impacted by different currencies, I mean, you see that as a good example, for example, it's a very small example, Switzerland, the Swiss currency, and the European market, because Switzerland is exporting most of the goods to the European Union, right? So they are in the center of Europe, and they have a different currency and a different fiscal system. This is literally moderating their economy. If Switzerland would have the same gold-backed standard, it would literally have a negative impact on Switzerland if they would have been done that. Because the system and the fiscal system and the strengths of their own currency wouldn't be able to adapt to rising demands or falling demands. So you would literally have to manage way more if you have the gold standard, instead of just leaving the market control it, because if there is an overflow of money, there is lower value of the money, right? So that would be the natural thing. Of course, that's why I say it's a very complex system. So it doesn't always mean that's the same. If a company has a huge profit, it doesn't mean that the value of the company or the stock goes up. So it can also go down because people are involved. So, so you could rather argue that the gold standard is not the better tool. It would rather be better to actually disallow people from speculating on that, because that would have a bigger impact on this, because then the efficiency mechanism would be bigger. The problem in itself is, again, people are speculating on that. It doesn't really mean that something is really like it, but people are speculating on that. And that is also, for example, with a lot of currencies, you also see that currently people are speculating that the currency will deteriorate and they're going to make money on that. So, of course.
I mean, I guess ultimately it depends, like you said, on how people perceive the government. So if you believe your government is benign and it's somebody that's there to help you, and the fiscal policies are there to ease out, and they will be done right, by the way, because like you said, it's very complex. So you could make a mistake and everything could go wrong. And the government is really there to help you, then yeah, it makes sense that you have some kind of control over fiscal policy. But then, of course, you have also a bunch of governments in the world, and I would say a lot that have significant amounts of corruption, and that end up accruing sort of wealth to the top, to the government, and leaving most of the people unable to fend for themselves. And maybe in those cases, it would be better if there was an outside kind of global standard for them to really understand what their dollars are worth. Now, having said that, therefore, we see many parts of the world where they are experiencing high inflation, and a lot of these people are therefore somehow adopting crypto as a result. And usually they go towards stable coins. And of course, people use Bitcoin and Ethereum as stores of value. Now, in that case, if you were a government such as Nigeria, such as Turkey, such as Lebanon, and you see that's happening, and you've essentially lost control of your fiscal policies, right? Or any kind of fiscal stimulus because people are just not using your money anymore. How would you advise the government in that position?
It's always a very difficult position. I mean, pretty much governments are in a way, and that's part of a lot of the government advisory I did lately. And the fun thing is, it always boils down to a very interesting fact. Globalization led to a different perception of what is a government and how is a country perceived. You know, we have all these digital nomads. Pretty much I can choose the service provider I want. And I speak now as a service provider because that's pretty much what a government becomes. So we are detaching ourselves pretty much from the governments and they become a service provider. Why is Switzerland so attractive? Because they are a good service provider. The roads are there, it's very safe, it's very stable, you have a good currency, you have a good market, you have nice living standards, right? So they provide you a good service because most of the citizens worldwide, they can now choose where they want to be. So I go to a good service provider. So when you look at it from a service provider perspective, it's also a currency is a service provided for you to actually do business, to actually do fair business in your country for this specific market. So if you have this currency, you can trade your services with this currency. But I expect the service provider that actually the currency is there and I can do trade with it. So that's why I say it can be also very, very complicated if you do business in a non-currency for not your market, because that can literally expose you to other risks, because it can also, the other market goes up while your own market is not holding up. So it can really have a negative impact for you too. So that's why normally the good fiscal currency would be a normalizing figure. Just as I said with Switzerland, it would normalize the market. It would help you actually to have a fair value for that, for what you're offering. But if the government is losing control over that and people start looking for alternatives, and we don't need cryptocurrencies for that. As you mentioned before, the taxi drivers in Turkey are also exchanging it for US dollars. So in this system, there's always an escape. I can always escape it. I can just buy euros if I don't like the US dollars. I can just buy Chinese yuan, whatever. There are so many different currencies on the world, and people sometimes, for example, Swiss currency, the Swiss franc is very, very attractive for many people to store value. So Switzerland is a good service provider, it seems, when it comes to fiscal policies, because the Swiss franc is stable, it's valued high, and everybody likes to trade it. So when I, as a government, figure out that I become a bad service provider, which literally means I'm offering a bad service to my people, then the only thing is sometimes to pivot. And that is a very, very hard thing, because the fiscal system is very, very complicated, it's very connected, and it's also, there are many different forces in the whole system. For example, we see now Milei doing it in Argentina. So he tries to actually get rid of the Argentinian currency and use the American currency, US dollar. So this is an extreme measurement, but pretty much when you say like my own offering is not helping, I need to have something else that is working at the moment. So he is actually trying it in a very desperate move, because using the currency of another country is, as I said, not always good. Because if you are not performing as good as the other country, you're actually devaluating your own country in the same moment. So this is always the thing. So if a country wants to pivot, and we have seen in the past countries having a very high inflation, and actually they were able to restore the trust. Because why is monetary system working? If I give you $10, you know that it's $10. That is the value. You know of the value. But if I give you 10 million Venezuelan pesos, I guess it's right, you don't know the value of it.
The money, Bolivar.
Bolivar. Bolivar. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So if I give you 10 million of that, you don't know the value of it because you never heard of it, you don't like it, whatever. So we don't agree that we have the same value because you have a different perception of the value. So when a government wants to do that, and when a government wants to pivot that back, they need to build trust. And that is the same with everything. It's the same for cryptocurrency, it's the same for PayPal. I mean, also PayPal, they don't really trade a value. They don't really trade a currency, but they trade value. So they bring you value. If I give PayPal $10, I expect PayPal to give me $10 back. So it's a very simple system in the end, right? So if a government is in a dire need to actually change their current fiscal system or also even the currency itself, then the first thing they need to do is build trust. So they need to ensure that all the trust building measures are there, that banks accept only this, or they fix it to certain other stuff. So that's why some pivoting is always right. We fix it to gold standards, as you said. So we have a fixed ratio on the gold standard. So we give you for 10 years this fixed rate, which has also downsides that need to be mitigated. It's not like a gold standard is suddenly making it perfect. It also has problems because for 10 years you cannot change the money supply. That's a big problem. But if your currency is actually devaluating fast and if your currency is under siege, let's say, then it is good to offer the safe haven and say like, hey, no matter what happens, it's for 10 years it's fixed, or for 5 years it's fixed. So for 5 years you can actually start building trust again. So you bought yourself time to actually give the people trust that the value is there, that they can exchange for the same day, also in 10 days or in 10 months, they can exchange something for a certain value. And that is how monetary system works. Only if we both agree that in 10 months, this 10 million will be also 10 million, then you're like, okay, give me back 10 million in 10 months. I'm going to trust you that it's still 10 million.
I think you touched on a very important point here, and this is the point of trust. And I think this is why there is this large push, or there's a movement who believe that a decentralized cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, and less so Ethereum, but anyway, let's say the ideal decentralized cryptocurrency is really the way to go, because people have stopped trusting governments. And one of the features of governments is that a lot of them, especially the democratic ones, they keep changing. So every 4 years in the US, you have a new regime and they have new policies. And I guess in Latin America, you have very similar things, maybe every 5 years. And so it's kind of unpredictable. So like the system in itself does not give you longevity if you are in a democratic system. And so it gives people, it gives the government or those in power an incentive to actually exploit the system for their own gain. And as a result, they conduct fiscal policies in a way that is benefits the short term and not the long term. As a lot of people have lost trust in that sense. So would you say that El Salvador, with introducing USD as legal tender and then bringing in Bitcoin as well, would you say this is what they were trying to do? They were trying to rebuild trust. And do you think they've done a good job of it?
Actually, not really. The problem with Bitcoin is, as I said, with many others. So it's not decentralized, and it's also by far not decentralized. I think like the top 12,000 wallets together own more than 70% of all the assets. So it's even worse than any economy of the world when it comes to how many people control the market. I think even just 100 wallets control almost 50% of all the value in there. So what happens when a system is actually dependent on 100 people and those 100 people know each other? So it's very easy to manipulate, right? So the problem with trust is
I just want to say something about that, right? So the point of decentralization is not only who owns what. Of course, that has a part to do, but it's also, I think, and with Bitcoin, it's also the scarcity factor and the predictability of how much inflation happens in Bitcoin, like how much new Bitcoin gets created. I think this is one of the features of gold, which made it a very good store of value, because people knew there was only going to be maybe 2 or 3% additional supply every year. And so it became a pretty stable store of value. And so that's one of the key features of Bitcoin, is that it doesn't grow fast and it doesn't grow on demand, meaning like there isn't somebody who can say, I'm going to make more Bitcoin, there'll be more Bitcoin and deflate everybody. Now, as far as the whales and stuff like that go, the way the Bitcoin system is designed is that it disincentivizes people from colluding. So there's no reason for the whales to actually do something to manipulate the market, because, as you said, it becomes a situation where people will flee. They will start dropping their Bitcoin because this is not a currency that is stable in, or not, I don't want to say stable because it's not very stable right now, but this is not a currency that has those features that we want in a currency, because there's too much control. So actually, even though there's a lot of control, you still see a very democratic process going on, and you still see people believing and having trust in Bitcoin, because the whales are disincentivized to do anything to break that trust, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, they actually want to build a hype. So actually the hype is actually part of that. So that's what we always saw, for example, every halving. There is no reason why a halving would actually create value, but it still does. And that's actually because people just have trust that they're gonna be greedy and getting more money. So it's actually not trusting the system, it's trusting that they can get money out of that. And that is the problem actually, when few people can control the system and can control actually the influx, because they have a very strong incentivation to actually treat the currency in a way that is beneficial for them. So you can collude, and this makes actually sense to collude, because in the end, what you're doing is you're driving in new money. And we have seen that pretty much the Bitcoin price is always driven by how many people are in the system. So how much new money is actually being flown in? That's the part of what is actually driving the money, because otherwise there wouldn't be almost a perfect correlation between new money influx and actually the Bitcoin force. So yes, there is a collusion, and that's what I say. That's the problem, and that's also a problem in every fiscal system. If a few people have more control than others, then it is harder to control, because you cannot see the full extent of the single person's doing. So in a perfect world, it would be a perfect decentralized system, but it is not like that when few people can control it. So that's why when we are going into this, it's very interesting to see that there are different forces at play. So yeah, it cannot grow infinitely, but as I said before, Bitcoin has a maximum. So what happens after the maximum? So literally, when you hit the maximum of Bitcoin, no country could ever grow. We couldn't have any technological innovation. We couldn't have any productivity surpluses, because there is not more Bitcoin. We cannot mine more Bitcoin after that. So it's just set. And then suddenly I need to decide, I cannot even offer something of more value, because then I would literally need to take from the others away to actually offer my services. And that is why I say there is a reason why infinite money supply is good, because in the end you don't supply money to buy stuff, you buy money into the market that actually other people can trade. So that is the reason for infinite money supply was not there to buy something. It's not like our bank account. And that is, I guess, what many people always try to oversee. It's not like a bank account. So the central bank is not like a bank account. I have more money and I buy things. No, it's actually they give more money to the banks, so the banks can trade more money between people who are trading stuff. Of course, if there is too much and the financial system is absorbing that, and we have seen that with all the Corona money flowing into cryptocurrencies, right? So if there is a surplus in the market, people start actually behaving differently, because they just create fictional value, and that is the balance you need to strike there, because you cannot.
It's interesting. I mean, getting into that infinite money supply is also an issue. In terms of infinite money supplies, that's what the legacy of the failing system that we've been using for the past, I don't know, like 100 years now. So it's a big issue as well. I give you an example. If you can print as much money as you can in any given time, you will have issue even with a simple thing as a war. The war cannot continue if you don't have money. If you have a limitation on money supply, a war could be avoided and be beneficial for the humanity, because as we can see today, dollar is being printed and we see people are getting, killed over and over, and war can last longer and longer than has ever been before. We know that Napoleon Bonaparte, when he was fighting one of his last battles in Waterloo, had to stop because he had no more money supply. So the war was ending faster. So the implication of money supply could have a very bad implication on the humanity at large. So I'm not too much in the favor of this kind of concept that has been looking at what's happening today in the world. When we look at, for myself, I'm not a big Bitcoin maximalist, but I'm in the favor of a solution that is closer to the gold standard. Okay, and Bitcoin might not be the final best solution, but that's maybe one solution closer to have a certain control into, having going back to gold standard and avoiding, the oversupply of loan. As we know, banks are managed by a fractional reserve, and they are managed by the amount of loan they are giving, because at the end of the day, if you don't pay, they take back your property. I don't think it's a fair system. And I want you to share on that, and, I don't want you to give you all the solution in one talk, but it's an interesting question to raise. That's, I kind of want to, to hear your view on that.
It is an interesting question to raise. And yes, the gold standard made for pre-1900s actually made sense because there was a different kind of system in place. I mean, just look at how the efficiency of the industry actually evolved. I mean, that was always, we didn't really have a lot of growth for most of the centuries for the last, so let's say, until the Middle Ages, it was pretty stable when it came to actually what was the productivity and how much money supply was needed to trade. That's why it was okay to trade actually in pearls. So you can also have like these pearls. You can have different metals. You don't need gold for that. So a lot of different countries were trading in different things. And that was okay because there was limited supply on that. The problem is we have now technological advances which leads to more efficiency in the market. The unlimited supply of money. So it's always a positive and negative thing. We try most of the time to focus on a negative thing. That's why I said everybody imagines just his own bank account, like I can print my own money. But it's actually not how banks work, and also in government fiscal systems. They're also not working like I have a bank account that is just unlimited big and they can just do whatever, because it will be also consequences. So we cannot actually print unlimited money, because then actually inflation hits and then we have some other problems with trade. Then actually we hurt ourselves. So when is infinite money supply good? When infinite growth is there. There is never infinite growth, but there is also never zero growth. In a way, we always have growth. So at least for the last 200 years, we haven't seen that there is any time where there was no more technology growth and no more industry growth than ever. Yeah, the economy can actually have negative growth. That can happen, but there is no productivity negativity. So in the end, the economy is in a short dip, but the productivity is still going up. So for this, we need infinite money. That doesn't mean that it is infinite, and it doesn't also mean that we have infinite people printing infinite money, and this will have no consequences. So the problem there is that we cannot compare it as our bank account. But we need to see that also when the economy is growing, we need more than that. Because, for example, if we can mine 2% more gold, so we have a gold standard, we can mine 2% more gold. What happens when the industry is suddenly growing for 2% and maybe another 2%? So suddenly we have actually 2% loss. We cannot trade the other 2% because there is not enough money to actually trade these 2%. So suddenly we have an inefficiency in the market. And then we extrapolate it, and 10 years later, we were growing for 4%. It's actually limiting our growth. So if we don't have enough money to actually enable this growth, then the growth cannot happen. Then we actually decimate growth. So yes, we could have in a model world. So if you really create a perfect model of the world, and if you say like we just have this finite number of value trading, as I said before, everybody of us has $10. It would work as long as we are just trading the same thing all over and over. But I don't have an incentivation to do something more because I cannot get more. There is no money in the system because you have $10, Shireen has $10, and I have $10. And we can just trade this $10. So either this limited supply will pile up at one side. So I have $30 and you don't have anything. Or we actually say like the only incentivation is that actually I can offer more. That is actually technology advantage, right? So with every new technology, we have more productivity. That means I can do a value that is not just $10, but I invent a new technology, something innovative, and suddenly I can do something that is worth $15. But in order to actually trade with you two, we need more than that because you're still offering something for $10. Shireen is offering something for $10, and I offer something for $12. So in order for us to trade, we would need suddenly $32 in the system. And that means we need to have more money supply because otherwise I cannot trade my extra value. And that is why it would be working in a different world. But the problem is that we would create other problems by actually limiting the supply. So it would be for a certain part of the equation, it would be beneficial. For another part, it would be actually very bad. So that's why we have a monetary system that is, let's don't say it's infinitely big. It's flexible. It's like a rubber band. Because it should actually, if the innovation grows, it should create enough liquidity that everybody can participate with a new innovation, right? So you are stretching this money supply like a rubber band. You can overstretch it and the rubber band actually breaks, and then you break your own economy, you break your currency, etc. If you don't stretch it enough, it's actually loose, so you don't have tension on it. So this is one of the problems that we have in a fiscal policy, that there are so many players. And the problem is not just trade. I mean, if we were really honest, it would be perfect if money would be just there to trade. But we have players who are actually gaining money from money. That's the subprime crisis Shireen was talking about. So people who were suddenly leveraging on other people's money, on other people's debt, and these debts were then actually backed up with some financial mechanisms and some derivatives there and some derivatives here, all fictional money with fictional levers, with fictional numbers on top of that. So nothing anymore with real world. So the base problem here is actually that if we look at the real financial system at the moment, less than, I think it was 2 or 3% of all the money in the world is actually backed by something that has real world value. So if we want to speak about the biggest problem of the world is actually the financial system itself. So that's the financial system what we need to tackle, because money should be there to actually trade value. But money is right now the financial value. So that's the problem. We made money to a product and a service that is being sold and upsold instead of actually making it to what it is. It's a mean of trade. So if less than 10% is actually real value, so really backed by some product, by some real estate, by some business or some hard cash, let's say, and 90% is just fictional value in some bookkeeping tools and some stock market tools, then we have a problem that needs to be tackled, because just 5% of deviation in this financial market can actually ruin more value than all people combined on the whole world are creating with real work, with real products, with real whatever we have there.
I want to say I finally agree with that statement. So a lot of what you've said, I don't really agree with, but I do agree that money shouldn't be the goal. And money should be a tool to help us achieve, I guess, a functioning society and a functioning economy. But it has become like, this is the thing that people work towards. It's like, I'm trying to get money as opposed to money is a means for me to get value from something else. So I think 100% agree with you there. And I think the counterpoint that I wanted to make is that a lot of what you're saying, on paper makes sense, that you do need to be able to control fiscal policies and you do need to have sort of an inflationary monetary supply if you want to encourage growth. But at the same time, what we've seen in the past, in the last, I don't know, decades maybe, I don't want to say centuries, that's too long, is that really hasn't worked out. What you end up having are these cycles of boom and bust, where you will see, the economy grow at a fantastic pace because of this availability of being able to juice it up with the ability to actually put more liquidity in the market. But like, as to your point, not in a way that's actually sustainable because there's no value backed. And then the bust, where there's this huge loss of value because that value wasn't there to begin with. But then as a result, it causes this great human devastation. So I agree with you that the financial system is broken. And I think there needs to be a different approach to this. And I think that to some extent, and this is the promise of Web3, and this is the promise of cryptocurrencies, hopefully, not a realized promise, but a promise nonetheless that hopefully will be realized in the future. To some extent, the people have to get back into the game, right? If you leave this all up to the governments, and the governments are clearly, not having the right incentives, and the system is a little bit messed up. And as you said, it's not only the government, it's external governments that are coming in and messing up the system as well. If you leave this up to the government and the people, go ahead.
Also big privates. Don't forget, it's
Big
actually
privates, exactly.
governments are just a reflection of the society. And that is a very interesting statement I heard once. And it really made me think, and yes, it is like that.
Yes, it is, because the people that are in the government come from the society at the end of the day, and they reflect very much the values and the culture. But if you leave it up to the government, very often that's what you have. And this fiat system that we have is clearly a boom and bust system that, people we're being very deliberate about trying to hopefully fix. And so I think the people have to get into the game. And I think the way to do this is through this new form of digital money, which is permissionless, as we like to call it. And that doesn't have these gatekeepers that say, okay, you must have a banking license in order to participate in, printing money or creating more money and these types of things. And that maybe will give a bit of a counterbalance. Again, it's a promise that hasn't been fulfilled. We still see a little bit of issues, or many issues, in cryptocurrencies, the lack of stability with something like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But at the same time, at least there's a step towards the right direction. Your thoughts?
Yes, it is one part of the puzzle. The problem per se is, and we always need to say it, no matter how we call it, and if we call it the official backing, if we call it a fiscal system, whatever, there is always this loophole we talked at the beginning. People trying to outpace others. And that is actually where John Nash, Nash equilibrium. People tend to do the thing that they think will grant them the best outcome. So no matter what you introduce, people will use it to their advantage. And for example, for governments want that their economy is growing faster than the other economy, right? So if I can actually stimulate the economy by actually pumping more money in and to allow better investment, then I have an incentive as a country to actually do that, because I want prosperity for my own country. So then we come actually to the problem that is an egoistic problem. So I want to have the best for my country. It's not that I want the best for all countries, because every country would say, like, I want the best for my country. And then if I am happy, then the others can follow. And the same is actually happening for all the countries. So if there is a country limiting the supply of money and therefore limiting the supply of growth to the companies, they are always strategically worse off than the others. So the only logical solution is always a self-replicating system that will always lead to this bust and boom and whatever. So we have always this system that somebody tries to outpace the others. That creates incentives which have external negative externalities pretty much. So it creates problem for others. For example, the US used the Corona fiscal system to actually stimulate their own economy. But due to that huge money supply, they were actually creating problems for Europe or for any other countries. So they were looking US first, America first, right? So we will hear that a lot more. But no, in the end, Joke aside, it's really for US it makes sense. So for the US as a country, it makes sense to do it because they want to stimulate the economy so they can grow faster than the others. And they have an unfair position. So the problem is, what are we actually fearing? Is it the individual that is greedy? Is it the group that gets greedier for the individual? Or is it a group being stronger than the other group? Because USA is the biggest economy, or second biggest, depending on what you hear on the numbers now with China. So they have an unfair advantage that their economy is actually in the leading control group. So you cannot take away this leverage because every country wants to have, of course, its own fiscal policy because they want to decide how much they can invest and how they can actually grow their economy better. So
yes, and I
either
think
we
this
find
is
an international...
Yeah, I think this is where we agree. What we're saying is that there's too much leverage and there is too much power control in the hands of a handful of countries who have this leverage and power and that do things to their own advantage. And this is what I mean by people have to start getting into the game, and that requires this kind of, what we want to say, decentralized money, or this money that is permissionless, that people all control but don't control.
Well, the problem is, so if we have the extreme, let's say everybody has a form of Bitcoin, the optimal same currency, that would actually limit a government's ability to control the growth of their own economy. So we would need to internationally...
I think that is kind of the point. I do believe that there is a I do believe in capitalism, and I do believe there is a human desire to better themselves, and I do believe that there is a market that will self-adjust, and that it doesn't always fall on the government to encourage growth, and that people will sort of always try to be better and do better, and it doesn't have to be fiscal policies that cause growth.
But you're forgetting one point. For example, a country like Nigeria needs to grow way faster than a developed country like Germany. But if they have the same fiscal policy and the same fiscal possibilities, a country like Nigeria can never grow as fast as Germany because of the limitations of the currency.
Growth comes in three ways, and I'm quoting from Mark Andreessen here. He said growth comes from either a growth in productivity, so you have technology that makes you more productive. Growth comes in the form of natural resources, so you have more whatever, you find oil, you find gas, you find something. And growth comes in the form of population growth. So the problem in Nigeria is not so much that of population growth because they are growing fast. It's also not so much natural resources because they have tons of natural resources. It's actually the corruption of the fiscal and monetary system and the government.
No, it's
so
not
if
just
you actually
the fiscal monetary, it's the whole corruption in the whole country.
Exactly, corruption of the government in general. But a lot of it has to do with money at the end of the day, right? What are they trying to gain there? They're trying to gain wealth. So if you actually fix that part and to outsource that part so the government is no longer in control, perhaps, and I'm not saying I know the answer to this, I don't clearly, but I imagine that if that money is no longer in their control, those are the two things can cause growth: their population growth and the fact that they have lots of natural resources. So I don't think it's up to the government. I really don't.
But in a world of limited money supply, that's why I said let's make this hypothesis that everybody uses the same currency and has the same access to it, and that this supply is limited. In this money world, natural resources could actually never create growth because you just have limited money supply, so you can never sell it. So you can never have this growth. So you cannot grow faster than Germany, except if you take money away from Germany. So then you have the problem that
the market
for the same resources.
The market there is likely to adjust. So if something is more valuable and everything, other prices have to go down, usually there's more than one new thing in the market, right? So there'll be a multiple number of things which become more valuable and cause other things to deflate in price, which is fine because then those things will naturally go away. It's kind of a little bit of a survival of the fittest. But anyway, Benjamin, I will let you. I will give you the final word here, and then we're going to have to wrap this up. So please make your point.
No, the point is there when I say the problem is when you have a limited market and people start fighting over limited resource, it always gets ugly. So just imagine how people react when you just have a limited cake supply and everybody starts stacking and actually everybody gets greedy. So you don't actually incentivize to work together to create more. You actually let them fight over something existing. That is usually a very good way to actually create problems in the market. So that's why I say it's rather better to have people fighting for growth and to get more out of the system rather to have like, I can only grow when I take away somebody else's cake. And that is why I say limited supply won't give us a peaceful world. It's rather pivoting us to a world where we fight more.
Well, but we did agree that money is not the point, right? So money is not the cake. Money is just the means to the cake. So if there's more cake, less money, but there's more cake, everyone is still happy. But anyways, Benjamin, my last question for you is please do tell us something about yourself that most people don't know about.
What most people don't know about me, pretty much what most people don't know is that I'm living out of a backpack. So most of the time I have my backpack with all my belongings there. And that is for years now my true friend and follower. So I need to post a picture because most people don't believe me there. But yeah, that's pretty much my backpack.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I do hope to meet with you in person. We can have this debate endlessly
I guess,
sometime soon. And I think you do come by to Saudi Arabia and Dubai from time to time, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Always being called everywhere.
Fantastic. So last thing, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Pretty much I have a huge online footprint. I guess Instagram, yeah. LinkedIn. I just had Instagram in mind. So LinkedIn is one of the great examples, or just email, or I guess you're going to find a lot of my footprints online.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And it was a great conversation.
Thank you so much. It was great. And I think there were a lot of insight, and I like the back and forth discussion. Thank you again, Benjamin, and looking forward for posting this podcast to the world to see, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, Mord and Shireen. Really, thank you also for the great input, Shireen.
Thank you.
Bye.